when he assumed office in his first, and he had Lalu Yadav as his railways minister. And it is a tradition for prime ministers to introduce their ministers in the Lok Sabha. So when he got up to introduce his ministers, and he was introducing Lalu Yadav, the BJP and others, got up and started shouting "Chor, chor, chor, chor." It must have been very humiliating for him. But there was not a flicker of emotion. He went ahead with what he had to do. And, you could see that beneath that mild, manner of his, there was a steely resolve. He held virtually every important economic/financial position in the government. Whether it was, sort of economic advisor in the finance ministry or RBI governor, so on. And then, of course, finance minister, and then finally prime minister.
Dr. Manmohan Singh's leadership was grounded in his unwavering belief in the potential of the Indian people and the country's ability to emerge as a global leader. His ideas on education, economic reform, and social justice practically laid the groundwork for a more inclusive and prosperous India. So, on the sad occasion of his demise, rich tributes have poured in from all quarters. I'm going to introduce Aarti Jerath, senior journalist, who is joining me here on the program, someone who has observed Dr. Manmohan Singh very closely, to talk about the major milestones in the life and times of Dr. Manmohan Singh and how we remember him today. Welcome, Aarti. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's begin with one quote which is now all over the place, and something that he himself said, that, history will be kinder to me than contemporary media. He had a very good sense of the fact that media has not been fair to him. He's been probably unfairly judged. And now the same channels that tore him to shreds for coal scam and for being accidental PM and puppet PM are now singing pains about his milestones and his achievements.
Yes, absolutely. And it's incredible how right he was, because history is being kinder to him in judging him. And yes, I mean, today we had even a BJP prime minister, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, singing peals of praise, to him, because a lot of what the Modi government has achieved is built on the foundation laid by Dr. Manmohan Singh, first as finance minister and then as prime minister. You look at the whole sort of economic growth story. It is Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh who steered the opening up of the Indian economy, the fiscal reforms that were necessary, to bring India, into the world, to integrate India into the world economy. And of course, this whole growth, sort of started from there. And then when Manmohan Singh became prime minister, we had this sort of, despite 2008 bank crash, international bank crash, the Indian economy did phenomenally well. I think, posted the highest growth rate during his premiership. And, I mean, all that has really paved the way for India to become the fifth largest economy now. And now, Narendra Modi is hoping to make it the third largest economy. But, these are all building blocks that went before that. And then, of course, India's presence on the global stage, which I think began with Vajpayee's government, which did the nuclear test. And, that sort of woke the world up to, India's capabilities as a nuclear power. And then came the historic civil nuclear deal with the US.
Yeah. If I can frame my question on that for you, Aarti, because yes, today we are saying he risked his government over the nuclear deal with the US. And that is the biggest testimony of how he prioritized the country over retaining power, something that is an alien concept perhaps now. You see the lust for power dominating everything else, but here was a man who stands tall for how he prioritized the country, and today everyone is bound to acknowledge that he did risk his own position of power for the nuclear deal with the United States. And for that, I guess, for that, obviously across board everyone has decided to stand up and take notice of the man.
Yes, of course, because I think he was truly committed to the nuclear deal because he felt that India was being denied crucial technology, because of this nuclear apartheid,
Yeah.
and this was one way of bypass. I mean, we did not become a member of the NSG, but a lot of the restrictions were removed because after we signed that deal with the US, President Bush pushed pushed really hard for India to, get to help India gain access to vital technology, which is important. I mean, today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is talking about making semiconductors in India. Now, would that have been possible if we hadn't done this, sort of nuclear deal with the United States and got those restrictions removed that the NSG imposed on countries, on non-nuclear countries, or countries like India. So I mean, as I said, these are all building blocks in the process of governance. And I'm really glad that today Narendra Modi is acknowledging how much Manmohan Singh contributed to the country's prosperity. And yes, the commitment that so Manmohan Singh was always known as this very meek and mild man who never raised his voice. When he when he assumed office in his first term, and he had Lalu Yadav as his railways minister, and it is a tradition for prime ministers to introduce their ministers in the Lok Sabha. So when he got up to introduce his ministers, and he was introducing Lalu Yadav,
Yeah.
the BJP and others, got up and started shouting "chor, chor, chor,
Yeah.
chor." I mean, it must have been very humiliating for him. But he, there was not a flicker of emotion. He went ahead with what he had to do, and you could see that beneath that mild, manner of his, there was a steely resolve, and that steely resolve really showed when he pushed. I mean, he
Yeah.
pushed against all the naysayers within the Congress, and of course his biggest ally at that time, which was the left, had 62 members of parliament. It was a major pillar on which that UPA coalition government rested. But
Right. Some 28 parties. I mean, imagine keeping the
yeah,
flock together. And like you said, I
absolutely,
appreciate the kind of words you're using, the steely resolve behind that genteel persona that he maintained at all times. But, I take your point also about how he was the man who laid perhaps the framework on what Mr. Narendra Modi is building today. But the interesting part is that Mr. Modi is forced to acknowledge that today, which they would
yes.
not, under ordinary circumstances, even go anywhere close to saying that somebody from the Congress laid those foundations. But today, those words have come from the Prime Minister himself. I'll play that out in a bit. But your thoughts on that?
No, I think, this is the whole thing. As Manmohan Singh said, that, he hopes history will be kinder to him because, his contribution is written in black and white in large letters. And I think nobody can question that. And people do have to acknowledge it because without the steps that he took, India would not be where it is today. And,
Yeah.
whether it is our arrival on the global stage, whether it is, the fact that today we can even conceive of manufacturing semiconductors in India, the whole Aadhaar card, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, the UID thing was started by the Manmohan Singh government with Nandan Nilekani in charge. And, I mean, that has now become the basis for identity or identification, across sectors for Indians. It's such a vital, document for us. So, I mean, I mean, if I would, actually need to think, one doesn't even need to think very hard to just list how much he has done.
Yeah.
And I think that is why Prime Minister Narendra Modi is having to acknowledge the
And it's
contribution
not
made by
just
Manmohan.
domestically, Aarti. Look at the kind of statements that came from across the globe, even then and now, of course. He was apparently the go to global leader. when the G20 leaders met post the financial crisis, the man who steered the country through that global financial crisis, he was looked up to as someone who knew the ins and outs of how to handle the economy in that sort of a crisis, and for that he earned the respect of the likes of Barack Obama as well, who, if I
That's
remember
right.
correctly, I think, yeah, I called him some the man with I'm forgetting the exact, the financial guru. I think he described him as the financial guru,
And
so
he
yeah,
said that every time he met Manmohan Singh, he learned something new.
yeah,
Because
exactly, yes, yes,
Manmohan Singh had so much. Look at his wealth of experience. I mean, even before he became finance minister, he held
yeah,
virtually every important economic slash financial position in the government.
yeah,
Whether it was sort of economic advisor in the finance ministry or RBI governor, and so on. And then, of course, finance minister and then finally prime minister. And even
yeah,
when the Congress was out of power, he headed, again, people sort of think of him as just a policy man, but he was
mm,
very critical even to the Congress party when it was out of power. He headed several committees, helped shape its thoughts on economic reforms. That's when the whole phrase of reforms with a human face, came up. The idea being that you can do reforms and you can also promote inclusive growth, inclusive development, and reach out to the poorest man through the reforms process. And so, this whole thing of reforms with a human face. I mean, I think Sonia Gandhi came to really rely on him. And, look at this incredible thing because
mm,
uh, a lot of people who were close to Narasimha Rao were
yeah,
actually, kind of excluded once Sonia Gandhi took over.
mm,
But
mm,
Manmohan Singh managed to bridge that gap. And,
mm.
and I think that is because of his merit, his
I wanted to
wisdom.
come to that bit, if I may just, pick up from that point you made about Sonia Gandhi, because there is so much mystery around what the relationship was like. Those who were his detractors would say, well, he was a puppet prime minister, the NAC was deciding everything, the cabinet was not doing what it should have. What was your understanding of what this relationship really was like after Sonia Gandhi relinquished the position, decided to have Manmohan Singh sit on the saddle? What was the inner workings like?
So, you see, I think Manmohan Singh was quite overwhelmed at the fact that Sonia Gandhi had placed this immense faith and trust in him to make him the prime minister.
Hmm.
And I think he felt a deep sense of loyalty to her, which is why through all the ups and downs in those 10 years, including the time when, Rahul Gandhi humiliated him by tearing up that
Yeah.
ordinance at a press
Hmm.
conference.
Hmm.
It was an ordinance the government was passing under pressure from some of its allies, which was going to help, politicians facing corruption charges, kind of get into parliament.
Hmm.
Um, but Manmohan, and I'm sure Manmohan Singh must have been very, very upset.
Yeah.
But the fact that he did not rock the boat, and I think Sonia must have, told Rahul Gandhi something because
Hmm.
apparently
Hmm.
Rahul Gandhi went the next day to apologize to Manmohan Singh,
Yeah.
for having crossed the red line and done something which was unpardonable. And the fact
Hmm.
is that Manmohan Singh did not rock the boat because I think he felt that sense of loyalty that he had been given the
Yeah.
trust to run the government and he was going to run it despite all the troubles, the pulls and pressures and so on and so forth. But
Yeah.
also,
But
I think
Aarti,
this,
would you, in overall analysis, would you still say that the credit which was due to him was never received while he was alive? Because you see, election victories were all Rahul's. The welfare architecture, the single most important scheme that saved India, Manrega was all National Advisory Council. And then, like you said, to add insult to injury, Rahul Gandhi humiliated him publicly by tearing up that ordinance. So while he was alive, he never received the sort of credit that he should have from even from within.
no, absolutely, he didn't. And
Hmm.
what happened was actually, I think in the first term, the UPA worked very well. And, whether it was Manmohan Singh or Sonia Gandhi, they worked in tandem. And yes, many of these ideas came from the NAC, but, ultimately it was the government and the PMO that had to frame the rules and regulations and,
Yes.
get them implemented and get them circulated and implemented. So, I think they both worked together very well. The problems really arose in the second term. And mind you, the fact that they worked together very well showed in the election results because in 2009, the Congress increased its seats by 60.
Yeah.
It had barely scraped together a government, in 2004, but in 2009, it was 200 plus. And everybody thought, okay, well, the Congress is on the road to revival. And of course, it was a political victory. I think things like Manrega and all did help. But I think also, and this is where I will give Manmohan Singh the credit, that whole fight that happened with the left over the nuclear deal, and the fact that the left withdrew support, and then the government had to face a no confidence motion, and there were those very ugly scenes in Parliament where wads of money were thrown around,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was,
During
I
that
think,
no
a really
confidence motion. Yeah.
yes, during that no confidence motion. And the government passed that no confidence motion with the help of the Samajwadi Party. And actually, emerged more stable, once
Yeah.
the left pulled out. And if you remember at that time, these slogans were raised, Singh is king, Singh is king. And, I think many of the urban middle classes, which were very keen on pushing ahead with economic reforms at a fast pace, were really happy that the government had got rid of the left and could now, sort of go ahead with economic reforms. So in the elections of 2009, the Congress swept all the urban seats, across all the metros and the big cities, the Congress swept those seats. And I
So,
think
in that
part of
sense,
the
he's an
credit must
underrated
go.
politician, isn't it? He did get his
Absolutely.
politics right. People talk
Absolutely.
about him as an economist primarily who could not marry economics with politics. But from what you are saying just now, it seems he did have his grasp on politics as well.
Well, you tell me, who was managing the government, that really unwieldy coalition government? I think Vajpayee had shown the way because he ran his government very successfully for 5 years. Yes, Sonia Gandhi, you know, was managing the alliance politically. But in the government, it was Manmohan Singh who was managing the allies. Whether it was
Yeah.
Lalu Yadav, whether, the temperamental Lalu Yadav as railways minister or whatever. So, and I think that was, again, Manmohan Singh's very accommodative, consensual nature,
Yeah.
of listening to people and taking their opinion, their
So that
advice.
brings me to, yeah, the other question about, like you said, he was never that combative, confrontational person. He knew how
Yes.
to get his way around with the persona that he had. But on the park policy, Aarti, is where he received a lot of criticism. Of course, today's muscular Modi politics would not subscribe to what Manmohan Singh did at that time, because he clearly exercised strategic restraint after what happened in 2611. He used what some call coercive diplomacy to name and shame Pakistan, but that seemed to be not enough. Where do you stand on the way he dealt with the Pakistan issue?
You mean post the Mumbai terror strikes?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, I think Shankar Menon who was NSA at that time, has written extensively, in one of his books on that. And, how he felt that strategic restraint was not a good idea, and that, Pakistan should be, uh, you know, sort of a strong response should be given to Pakistan. But he said, as things proceeded, and in hindsight, he realized that strategic restraint was actually the way to go. Otherwise, India could have been landed in the kind of situation that Israel and Palestine currently find themselves. If
Interesting.
Israel had shown the wisdom to exercise strategic restraint when it was attacked by Hamas, maybe you wouldn't have had that awful war that is going on today, and all those, children and women who are being killed and, assaulted.
Yeah.
Uh, but 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 we chose to exercise coercive diplomacy instead,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
think it did work because the message did go down in the West, which till then was not really ready to acknowledge Pakistan's role in sort of exporting terrorism to India in this whole
Hmm.
business
Hmm.
of cross-border terrorism, which we had been screaming about for so long. But the world
Yeah.
started acknowledging it. And I think the world appreciated the fact that, we were a nuclear power, we are rather a nuclear power. Pakistan is a nuclear power. If there had been, some kind of a war, God knows where it would have gone. Because passions were running very high in India at that
Hmm.
time
Hmm.
after what happened in Mumbai.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, I think, Manmohan Singh, together, of course, with Pranab Mukherjee, I mean, it was really a collective effort. And,
Hmm.
that's what is good governance. It has to be a collective effort. Our
Hmm.
system calls for a collective effort. It cannot be a one-man show. So,
Hmm.
I think everybody worked together. They all consulted. They all respected each other, and they worked together. And yes, I think post 2611,
Hmm.
India's response was very mature, very,
Hmm.
diplomatic, and successful.
And you do believe that
So,
held us in good stead. It
well,
was not as if
again,
that did
that
us more
happened.
harm than good.
So, Afrida, if you look at it, I mean, not
Hmm.
just internationally, but
Hmm.
ultimately nationally as well, because remember, these terror strikes happened in 2008. In
Yeah.
2009, the Congress came back with 62 more seats,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
obviously, there was an appreciation across the board,
Hmm.
of the kind of reassurance that the government gave the people, in the wake of this whole, attack that happened in Mumbai.
Yeah.
People
Hmm.
felt that the country was in safe hands, it was in capable hands. And I think, yes, as Prime Minister, lot of the credit does go to Manmohan Singh.
Right. In conclusion, Aarti, I want you to give me your takeaways from the life and times of Dr. Manmohan Singh, because you see, he rose from humble background. He had no political background, and in fact, he was a member of parliament from my home state, from Assam. And now we read these anecdotes about how he took this two-bedroom apartment, and Hema Prabha Sekya had to do that because there was so much of outrage, the fact that he was not a local resident. Uh, but your takeaways, there are must be so many anecdotes that you remember from those days.
Well, so just look at him. Humble man. He has talked about how he used to, study by the light of a kerosene lamp. But, he never tom-tommed it from the roof. I mean,
Hmm.
he just worked very hard. He was brilliant, obviously, which is why through merit and scholarship, he managed to go to, Oxford and Cambridge,
Yeah.
and, and became such a renowned economist. Uh, and, I mean, I think he remained, the fact that he came from a humble background, he remained a very simple, humble man all his life, even when he was prime minister. His
Hmm.
lifestyle was very simple. He ate very simply. He dressed very simply. You see, he never changed the color of his turban. It was always
Hmm.
blue. He
Hmm.
didn't believe in, flashy red or yellow or orange or anything. So, his whole demeanor was sober. And, Afrida, I mean, one thing that really touched me was, I mean, I used to interact with him, quite often in Parliament. We would go to his room, and he was always welcoming, always ready to talk to us. And, he would always say, Aarti Ji.
Hmm.
I mean, here he is. At that time,
Yeah.
he was leader of
And I
opposition,
even saw
much
him
older
taking
than me and
questions on,
everything.
yeah, in
But
his
he
during
would he
his
was
tenure.
always be so polite, so polite,
Yeah.
RTG. He always said G
Hmm.
when he addressed anybody from the media.
So that's
And,
the decency, the dignity that he carried himself with. Of course, all of us are sort of witness to that. But I want to ask you, that uh, for a man like him, I mean, he would take questions. I saw him attend an India Today conclave where people were bombarding him with questions about that whole episode in Parliament where notes were displayed and whether cash was exchanged for votes. And the man is humbly responding to those combative questions. That's unheard of, Aarti, now. Now it is beneath the
Uh,
Prime Minister to take questions. So much has
absolutely.
changed.
So much has changed. I have a little snapshot uh,
Hmm.
of a press conference on board the prime ministerial plane on our way back from Washington, D.C., after he had signed that historic nuclear deal with the United States. And, we're all crowding around him with our notebooks and our pens and bombarding him with questions. And he's patiently answering all our questions. At
Hmm.
no stage did he get annoyed or, and, there was I mean, and at no stage did anybody try to plant questions on us. Like it's sometimes done, you are told that, ask this question. But nobody tried to do that. And he would take the questions and answer them. And I think because he was so sincere and so honest himself, he didn't feel afraid of the media. He just answered with the, honesty and simplicity that describes Manmohan Singh.
Absolutely. On that note, thank you so much, Artsy, for sharing your thoughts, for joining us today, and for being
Thank you.
so
Thank you.
upfront with all the
Yeah.
questions that I
No,
put
it's
to
a
you. Thank you
pleasure to
so much.
talk about him. I think, he really is a
It
man
is indeed.
who history is now, fortunately, judging time.
Right. He led a full life, and of course, our rich tributes, we pay our homage to the man who contributed so much to this country. Nothing can take away from that. Thank you, Arti. Thanks again.